You have been trained to believe that hard work is the missing ingredient, and that money is just the reward you earn when you finally become the right kind of person. That story is comforting, and it is false, because in 2026, the people getting rich are not the ones who try harder. They are the ones who already have momentum, already have access, already have rules built into their favor, and already know how to compound advantages while everyone else is still learning how to survive. And here is the part nobody wants to say out loud: the system is designed to amplify difference. The gap does not widen because you failed. The gap widens because the game is structured so that winners get better faster than losers can recover. This is not motivational content. This is financial education, plain and cold. And if you are anxious right now about AI replacing jobs, inflation quietly chewing through your paycheck, housing prices detaching from wages, and retirement drifting farther away like a mirage, you need to understand one mechanism that shows up everywhere. It is called the Matthew effect, and in your life it is not a theory, it is your daily experience. Think about how your bank account behaves. When you have a little money, one surprise expense can destroy your month. One car repair, one medical bill, one delayed paycheck, one rent increase. When you do not have reserves, life punches you and you stay down. Now think about the wealthy household across town. They get the same surprise expenses too, but it does not permanently change their trajectory. They have credit lines, they have assets that can be borrowed against. They have professionals who handle problems in hours. And when markets move, they are positioned to turn volatility into opportunity. That asymmetry is not accidental. It is how wealth works. And in 2026, it is accelerating. Let me tell you how to use this idea the right way. Not as a religious slogan, not as a self-help poster, as a checklist for reality, as a way to locate where you are stuck, as a way to stop feeding the loop that keeps you poor. Because if you misunderstand the Matthew effect, you will waste years doing the right activities in the wrong room. You can study, you can hustle, you can network, you can take classes, you can build a side hustle, and still end up broke. Not because you lack talent, because you were denied the inputs that compound. So today I am going to walk you through the mechanism, then the mindset that traps you, then the strategy that changes outcomes, and finally the ugly truth about where opportunity really moved in the last decade. If you stay for the end, you will see why so many wealth-building scripts are obsolete right now. First, let's define the trap in one sentence. When advantages exist, they tend to accumulate. When disadvantages exist, they tend to accumulate. Strong gets stronger, weak gets weaker. The parable version of this idea is ancient, but in modern life, you can observe it every day in three places: jobs, capital, and attention. Jobs first. In the early days of the AI boom, people told themselves the same story they always tell: learn to code, learn to pivot, work hard, and you will remain employable. That was 2020 optimism dressed up as planning. By 2026, the automation is less theatrical. It is inside hiring screens, scheduling systems, customer support workflows, marketing content pipelines, analytics tools. In many industries, the job is not eliminated all at once. It is hollowed out. The middle-class role gets sliced. One person does what used to require five, and once the output is cheaper, the cost of labor gets negotiated downward. When that happens to you, your advantage shrinks. Your employer is not being unfair. They are responding to a new baseline cost curve. And if your household has thin cash, you cannot afford to wait out the transition. You need income now. So you take the first offer, even if it is worse, even if it resets your future earning power. Meanwhile, the wealthy entrepreneur hires AI like it is a tool belt. The wealthy household uses the same AI to move faster, sell better, invest earlier, and reduce risk. The same technology that threatens your job reduces their operational friction. That is the Matthew effect in employment. It is not just that the rich stay rich, it is that they compound resilience, now capital. Capital is where the gap becomes permanent, because money is not only a store of value, it is a lever, and if you have assets, you can borrow against them at lower rates, deploy them into opportunities, and survive downturns without selling. Inflation is your silent reminder of this. Yes, headline inflation may fall compared to the peak, but your lived purchasing power often does not fully recover. According to Federal Reserve data and multiple analyses by researchers who track real median consumption, many Americans have experienced years where their nominal wages increased, but their real buying power lagged behind. The groceries got more expensive, the insurance jumped, the utilities climbed, and the housing situation got worse. In a normal world, inflation is temporary. In a rigged world, the pain lasts longer than the headlines. Because asset prices can rise while wages lag. And once that happens, you stop catching up. You can work overtime and still fail to rebuild what was lost. The deficit compounds too. That brings us to attention. Attention is scarce, and it controls your access to information, communities, mentors, deals, and opportunities. Social media monetizes attention. But what it gives you back is not financial freedom. It gives you a sense of progress without actual ownership. In 2026, the creator economy looks like a highway. It looks accessible. It looks like passive income. But the data is brutally lopsided. For many platforms, the majority of creators earn little to nothing. Many people treat content like therapy for their insecurity, not as a business with distribution, retention, and margins. And most viewers never buy, they only watch. So you sit there consuming the dream while the wealthiest actors in the same ecosystem sell the infrastructure behind the dream. Sponsorship networks, software tools, paid communities, consulting, ad targeting pipelines, affiliate ecosystems, and institutional capital partnerships. Again, advantages accumulate. So the question becomes, which loop are you stuck in? Most people assume poverty is about effort. It is not. Poverty is often about inputs, not about how much time you spend, but whether your actions enter a system that rewards you. If you are in the wrong system, effort becomes a treadmill. You run, you sweat, you feel busy, but the outcome does not compound. That is why so many people in their late 20s and early 30s feel exhausted and still behind. And that is why the mindset piece matters, not in a spiritual way, in a structural way. The poor mind, in the language of old wealth teachers, is not just about lacking money, it is about lacking a model for how money moves. It is lacking financial literacy, yes, but more importantly, it is lacking emotional permission to act early and to handle uncertainty without panicking. There is a reason you see the same self-sabotage patterns. People buy the wrong things. People avoid the uncomfortable numbers. People take advice that sounds smart but is designed to keep them small. People refuse to confront risk because risk feels like failure. If you do not understand money, you treat it like a moral entity. You tell yourself stories like, money is evil, or rich people got lucky, or I am not the kind of person who invests. Those stories protect your ego. They also keep you trapped. Here is a darker truth. A negative financial mindset does not just influence decisions, it changes what you notice. If you expect your landlord to raise rent, you stop negotiating early. If you expect the bank to deny you credit, you do not build credit responsibly. If you expect your job to pay less every year, you do not invest in upskilling that actually moves your salary. If you expect the stock market to be a casino, you stay out and you miss the compounding that you could have participated in. And once you hit a certain age, those expectations harden. Your brain builds a fixed map. You do not just believe, you filter reality through belief. Then new information gets ignored. This is why the Matthew effect feels personal. If your mind says I cannot, the system ensures that cannot becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you might be thinking right now, okay, but what does this have to do with me? I work, I pay bills, I am responsible. Good, then you are exactly the kind of person who gets punished by a system that rewards advantage, not innocence, because responsibility is not a credential. It does not grant access to low-cost capital. It does not automatically turn savings into assets that grow. It does not prevent your landlord or your employer from extracting more value from your limited options. So understanding the Matthew effect should not make you feel guilty. It should make you angry, calmly, clearly, at design. And that anger should lead to one important pivot. Stop competing on the wrong dimension. Most people try to win by becoming stronger in their weakest area. They are poor in capital access, so they compete harder for income. They are poor in education, so they compete harder for certifications. They are poor in networks, so they compete harder for attention. It feels logical, it feels moral, it feels like improvement. But if your leverage problem is structural, effort alone cannot fix it. Here is the micro story that always shows up in my inbox, with different names. Picture a 32-year-old nurse named David. He works hard. He picks up extra shifts when overtime is available. He uses an app to track expenses. He cancels subscriptions he does not need. Then inflation hits harder than his salary growth. His rent rises. His insurance renewal increases. A car repair costs more than his weekly groceries. David does what responsible people do. He delays fun. He delays risk. He delays investing because the investing app tells him to wait for a better time. He keeps paying for survival. A year later, his friend from nursing school moved cities for a higher paying contract. David did not. He stayed near family. It was noble. It was safe. It was also expensive. Now David is behind, and he cannot catch up. He is not lazy. He is not unintelligent. But his cash flow is trapped in a loop where every unexpected expense reduces future optionality. Optionality is what rich people buy. And here is where the story gets truly ugly. David hears that his friend is doing better because she is smarter. David thinks the only explanation for relative success is personal superiority, so he blames himself. But the actual mechanism is different. The friend had access to a better network, better contract information, a temporary housing arrangement, and a credit score that allowed lower interest rates on a used car that then increased her ability to move quickly again. Advantage multiplied itself. David survived without multiplying. That is the Matthew effect applied to ordinary life. So how do you escape? You do not escape by praying for effort to be rewarded. You escape by changing rooms. The old story about the servant and the talents ends with a harsh idea. If you hoard or hide your advantage, it gets taken. If you use and grow it, you get more. In modern terms, you do not win by having potential. You win by deploying potential into compounding mechanisms. So you need a strategy built around two questions. What is your advantage relative to others? And where can you connect that advantage to a trend that pays? Most people are taught to fix weaknesses. That is the first script that keeps you average forever. Because if you try to become excellent at everything, you will become excellent at nothing. And if your goal is to be well-rounded to feel safe, your results will be mediocre. Because mediocre results attract mediocre opportunities. And mediocre opportunities keep your cash flow mediocre, which keeps your options limited, which keeps your decisions defensive. In the Matthew effect world, defense is poverty. Here is what works instead. You double down on strengths until they become your identity. Then you build systems to amplify those strengths. And yes, you still address weaknesses, but you do it with partnerships, outsourcing, delegation, and specialization. You do not grind your life trying to turn your weakest attribute into your personality project. This is where people misunderstand. When I say double down, I am not saying ignore development. I am saying stop trying to compete by improving your weak muscle when you should be building your strong one. Let me give you a second micro story. Suppose you have a person who is great at messaging but weak at execution. Another person is great at execution but weak at storytelling. Most normal advice says, become both. It says you should learn technical skills and learn marketing skills. It says you should be competent everywhere. What happens in real life is you become competent everywhere at a surface level. And the surface level is exactly the margin where the market punishes you. The better move is to partner, or to structure your business so that each part of the value chain uses the person who has the edge. One person owns distribution, the other owns implementation. Now you are not dividing energy trying to repair your weaknesses. You are combining strengths and letting the Matthew effect do what it does, amplify output. That is also why, in 2026, the most profitable businesses are often the ones that look simple. The power is not in complexity. The power is in leveraging the right strengths at scale with tools like AI, automation, and data. But you must notice what that means for you. If you do not have a marketable strength, AI does not save you. AI may actually reduce your value in the roles you currently rely on. So you need a strength that is hard to automate at the level that matters to customers. Credibility, niche knowledge, relationship access, taste, trust, and decision-making. In a world where AI can generate text, build simple landing pages, draft emails, and create basic visuals, generic skills become commodities. Advantage goes to the people who can apply judgment, understand customers, and operate in real distribution channels. Distribution is where the compounding happens. Distribution is where the Matthew effect hides. Now we are at the moment where the transcript you are rewriting would start talking about a four-step plan. I am not going to copy the same wording, because your life in 2026 is different, but the structure is what you need. Decision, advantage, alignment with the trend, then deep focus. So here is your framework, described in a way that matches the reality you face. First, commit to leaving the poor mindset, not in a dramatic way, in a procedural way. You stop acting like money is taboo. You stop treating financial education as entertainment. You start tracking your real numbers, your real liabilities, your real cash flow, and your real-time costs. You also stop waiting for confidence to appear. Confidence usually appears after action, not before it. Second, discover your advantage, not a vague passion. Your advantage is the thing you can do repeatedly with less fatigue than other people experience when they do it. It is the pattern you notice faster. It is the problem you can solve with fewer attempts. It is the topic you can study without losing the thread. If you are not sure, you can test this by looking at your life history. What have you done consistently that others struggled with? What do people come to you for? What do you learn quickly because you care? And be honest. Sometimes the advantage is not what you expected. It might be negotiation, it might be sales, it might be teaching, it might be writing, it might be project management, it might be organizing chaos. Third, Align your advantage with the trend that pays in 2026. And here is the part that gets people angry. The trend is not some get-rich-quick fantasy. The trend is where money flows because consumers choose to spend. Right now, money flows into digital experiences, into entertainment, into online education, into health optimization, into productivity tools, into lifestyle services, and into communities that reduce uncertainty. People pay for relief. People pay for identity. People pay for belonging. People pay for outcomes that feel immediate. Offline opportunities still exist, but they are constrained by cost, labor, and slower distribution. Online has lower barriers. It also has brutal competition, which is why advantage matters. If your work connects to the online world without being commoditized, you can build a stack of income sources that compound attention into cash. Fourth, specialize with obsession, not for a year, for a decade. Because compounding requires time and focus. You cannot scatter your energy across 5 careers and expect wealth. Wealth is a consequence of repeated output in one direction, and now we need to talk about the door idea. The Matthew effect can be explained as 2 rooms. In one room, the ceiling is low. People have to negotiate every month. They carry stress like a second job. They consume things that reduce anxiety in the moment, but increase risk later. Their conversations are about costs and complaints. Their networks are small because they are too busy surviving. In the other room, the ceiling is higher. People still worry, but their worry has a plan. They have reserves. They have access to capital. Their networks are wide because they are visible to opportunity. Their decisions are proactive, not reactive. Most people are stuck in the first room and keep doing things that make sense only inside the first room. They try to win inside a narrow budget. They try to outwork scarcity. They think saving alone will get them into the wealth room. Saving helps, but saving without compounding is slow. And in a world of inflation damage to purchasing power, slowness is expensive. So how do you move rooms? You move rooms by building compounding mechanisms. Compounding mechanisms are not just stocks. It is not just a retirement account. It is not just investing. A compounding mechanism is any system where your effort increases your future earning power more than proportionally. If you create a skill that makes you higher income, that is compounding. If you create distribution that brings customers repeatedly, that is compounding. If you create credibility that attracts partnerships, that is compounding. If you build an asset base that lets you borrow cheaply and survive downturns, that is compounding. The wealthy do this, the poor do not because they cannot, but because their minds are trained to avoid discomfort. They avoid public failure. They avoid market risk. They avoid networking. They avoid numbers. They avoid building systems that require delayed gratification. And in 2026, delayed gratification is not just a virtue, it is a constraint. While you delay, AI disrupts hiring faster. While you delay, housing prices move. While you delay, insurance costs rise. While you delay, retirement obligations deepen. While you delay, the rich buy time with assets. This is also why the learn to code advice from the early AI boom turned into a joke for many people. It was not that coding is useless, it is that coding without distribution and without a business model is not enough. AI can now draft code faster than many entry-level developers, and it can automate routine parts of the process. If you tell yourself that the next credential will save you, you might be repeating an outdated script. In 2026, credentials matter less than outcomes tied to real customer needs. That is the understanding part. But we still need the darker understanding, because knowing the strategy does not stop the system from being brutal. So here is the cliffhanger you should not ignore. Even if you do the mindset shift and even if you find your strengths, the wealth room is still gated. Gated by information, gated by capital costs, gated by education quality, gated by social networks, gated by location, gated by legal access, gated by timing. In the real world, it is not one gate, it is layers. And in 2026, multiple gates are closing at once. Housing is one. In the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and large parts of Europe, housing affordability has collapsed relative to wages. Even where mortgage rates stabilized from peak levels, prices often did not roll back in a way that restores affordability. That means many households are stuck in longer rental cycles. And while renting, you build no equity. Then insurance enters the scene. Climate-driven disruptions are pushing insurance markets into crisis. Premiums rise. Coverage shrinks. Certain